Okay, so I'm doing this because guys are asking questions, and it's easier to send a video than it is to send an email or step-by-step instructions. So we're going to start off here with this is a Armoury Renegade. I've bought a receiver set and put it together from parts. So you can see here on the front, I've just got this clipped in like that. If I can get it undone like that, get that out of the way so you can see. So unloaded. So I tried a bunch of different ways to do this, but this is simply attached here on the bolt, and it makes it into a pump action. It's about as much pressure to pump it as it is to use the straight pull. I have the straight pull handle on the other side, simply because that side has to stay open anyway. A lot of effort. This is about the 5th or 6th version of a pump handle I've had on here. I've got a bunch of other stuff kicking around. This was version 1, turned into version 2. This is what's left of version 3 after stripping some parts out of it. Tons of fun. Anyways, I'll show you how it goes together. So first we check, make sure it's unloaded. Grab this is just an Allen cap screw. This pulls out of here. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. That pulls out. This just slides forward. That just slides right off. So now it's just a plain Jane straight pull now still, right? Still functional as a straight pull. This is what the pump handle looks like. Pretty straightforward. So I was able to, you can notice inside there, on the outside here, we got screws, attachment screws in the back, the middle, and here. These screws here also screw through. So this transfer bar is actually epoxied to the plastic. This mag pull grip is epoxied in. I had to actually take and round off the underside of the grip to actually get it to sit to the radius that I wanted. But that's all it does right there. And this is just, this piece of aluminum is just epoxied to the transfer bar. Built up a little extra epoxy here to kind of reinforce that corner. So far, I think I've got about 40 or 50 rounds through the rifle with this pump. Not very much. It's not indicative of a long-term test, but that's pretty much it for a pump handle. The handguard matters, obviously, because this thing just slides over the end, and then it's got a little bit of play. It's a little bit of play to it. A little bit of play. So basically the diameter of the handguard is what holds this in place. So put that back in there. Put that back in there. It's a pretty straightforward mod, actually. I was debating about putting this together as a kit. I'm not sure how much interest there'd be in that. I've got version 6 is in the works right now. We're gonna do something a little different with the transfer bar. We're gonna 3D print the front handguard. It'll have this stuff built into it on the front and the back. This won't be proud on the outside. There'll actually be a pocket that this slides into. And the reason for that is that all of the pressure on this handguard is when you're pushing backwards, right? So when you're pushing backwards, that's all the pressure on the handguard. And if you look, I'm not sure if you can see it very well. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But this flexes slightly, and I'm not sure if that's something that concerns me or not. So that's where the longevity of this bar is going to be coming into question. So if this bar, the transfer bar, that's what I'm going to call it, the transfer bar. If the transfer bar sits into a pocket in the front pump handle, all of the pressure going back is going to be against that bar, and then I'm not sure if this is going to be friction fit into there or if that's actually going to be epoxied in there. But then there's also options too of just using a longer bar to get this relocated further forward or closer back. Because as you can see, I could come back another 2-3 inches there, 2 inches for sure, or I could go forward another 2 or 3 inches, right? So there's a lot of latitude here for what you actually want to do. But that's pretty much that, right? Yeah, we're gonna try and see what's going on with this. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention too. I'm gonna put together a bunch of short videos into one longer one through the whole build process. But I was running this this folding adapter. It's a Wish folding adapter. I was running that for a few months actually. This was my truck gun for quite some time. And one thing that I learned relatively quickly, much to my chagrin, is that there's a reason why the Law Tactical folding ones out of the US are $300 and the Wish ones are $40. I'm not sure. There's a couple of retailers in Canada that are selling something very similar to this. I am not sure if they are selling the same thing I got here. I might try one of those, but they're $100. This aluminum latch, which probably shouldn't be aluminum, and this aluminum pin here that releases the hinge mechanism when you open it up, this deformed pretty quickly actually. If you leave it open all the time, it's not a problem. If you close it and leave it closed all the time, it's not a problem. It's going back and forth. And where I had this underneath the back seat of my truck for, you know, using it as a truck gun, this was folded up and it would sit there like that. And when I wanted to use it, I'd pull it out and I'd flip this open, insert, slide this back, insert a mag, and then I was ready to go, right? So this was really handy that way. Anyway, this thing took a kicking and it doesn't work anymore, so it's been removed from the rifle because the rifle's got to function before anything else happens. Yeah, give me a second. So it's minus 42 with the wind chill today, so we won't be doing a range video today. I'll maybe add one later. But reattach the front sling mount. So it's real easy with press checks now. See what happens here if I do this. Press checks are real easy now. There's none of this bullshit like that. So it's kind of a different method of shooting a rifle, to be honest with you. I've never really been a huge fan of pumps. Pumps are for shotguns. I don't know, but this works way better on this platform than a straight pull. I don't have a big machine shop. I don't have a 3D printer. I don't have CAD blah blah blah. This is all screwdrivers, heat gun, and razor blades, right? This is not. I can't believe they haven't done this already. Some manufacturer that's making a straight pull hasn't turned it into a pump action. It just boggles the mind. The way Troy did theirs is really complicated and confusing. It's not confusing, but it instead of using a gas tube, you have to use a transfer bar, and it just, all their stuff is inside the handguard. I like my handguards nice and small. I like my I don't want big bulky bullshit out here. I want nice, trim, small, easy to operate, dummy-proof stuff. You know what I mean? Like this is perfect as far as I'm concerned, and it's got a TriggerTech trigger in it and a TriggerTech safety, so it's got the 45-degree safety. This was actually on a different rifle that I owned once upon a time, maybe one day. This is the Bushnell AR optic, 1:4, illuminated reticle, first focal plane. LVPOs, let's get into that a different time. But anyways, I have a pretty strong opinion on LVPOs and how they should be used, and I think most people on the internet are wrong. But anyways, I think most scope manufacturers are assholes and ignorant of why an LVPO is a good idea. But anyways, here we go. It's really easy to operate. You can use one finger. Use your pinky finger. It's really easy. Let's get this guy in the picture. It works well, surprisingly well. One thing, I didn't lube underside of the handguard at all because, well, reasons. But I'm not sure if you can see this in the video here or not, but we're starting to lose some finish there where the touch points are. Tons of fun. I'm gonna put out another video on how I actually got to this point, or maybe add it on at the end of this one, because this is gonna be a pretty short video. But there's a reason why my M-LOK rail doesn't have any slots. It's a big long channel, and that's because I cut them out all the way to here, because the first couple of versions I didn't use as firm of a plastic. I used a Kydex, an 1/8" Kydex, which didn't have nearly enough rigidity to handle the forces applied to it. It needed to be reinforcing, and that reinforcing turned to, yeah, I'll explain that in a different video. But here you go. Took me a little longer to do than that. Do this than I wanted to, but that's that. Yeah. I wish it still had the folder. I'm actually debating spending the $300. That's $3 US. That's like $1,500 Canadian. But you know what I mean? Like, I just. So it's the reason why the pump action Renegade came into being was because you had two options when you're shooting this thing. It was either going to be a bench gun, or if you wanted to actually carry it around, when you shot, bang, you had to do this, which wasn't bad. Or you had to do this, take your offhand off the forend, and you had to reach back and manually operate it this way, which, bang, bang, is silly, because taking your hand off the forend to operate the pump, it's just bonkers. Instead of over here makes more sense, because you're still on target, right? Over here, you're like dropping down a lot. Like if you're at CQB ranges, you're going from, say, you're dropping from about here to about the belly button as you're trying to rack another round in. How's that helpful? If you're at longer distances, well, you're screwed. It's gonna take you so much longer to get back on target. It's not even funny. This is the only way it makes sense to operate this rifle, because you can shoot, reload, shoot, reload. Well, I thought a pump was a better idea, because this is not, I'm not going to take this thing out to 600 yards and do silly things like that. This is supposed to be for behind the seat of the truck, or run and gun, maybe a 3-gun. Maybe there's a place for this in 3-gun. I don't know. Maybe the WK is better for that. I don't know, but What I really like about this thing though is all the parts on this thing came off an AR. So it's a way to reuse those parts. It's a shame that you had to spend 900 bucks on a receiver set to get there. That's BS as far as I'm concerned. Other than that, I'm actually really impressed with the Renegade. Like, for the flare on the magwell, mag changes are so easy in this. Have you ever tried changing on a stock WK-180, doing a mag change? Why didn't they tweak up the magwell on a WK so it matched up a Renegade? This is perfect. You get the mag out, you get the mag in, boom, you're back in the game. And the pump actually isn't that bad. It's starting to grow on me, to be honest with you. It's starting to grow on me to the point where I'm not sure there's any room in my safe for a WK. Not when the WK is the way it is now, versus what you can do with this for less initial investment, really, honestly. So anyways, that's my opinion. Anyways, it's loud. Thanks for watching. Okay, so sorry about the cigarette smoke. I'm still smoking. I'm a terrible person. Pump action Renegade. This is how I got there. This is the steps I took. Kind of reverse engineering this. I took some videos to show friends along the way. Just some guys I know that are as into things like this as I am, and it's always nice to bounce ideas off other people. So anyways, here's how I got there, and bear with me. This is kind of a reconstruction video. Thanks, guys. Okay, so from a previous project, I had some Kydex sheets. These are 12-inch square, fairly thin. There's not much to them. I was trying to do something. I had a few sheets left over, so I started with that. So what I did was I took my my heat gun, just a 120 volt heat gun, and I'd heat up a chunk of Kydex, heat it up, and then I'd drape it over top of the handguard, and I'd wind up with something like this, right? Something that just kind of, this piece has been bent. This is from version 3, but anyways, it's a good demonstration. And that like that. But then I'd have pieces draped over everything else. So then I very carefully measured across the top so that I had a piece that I could cut that would fit all the way around, right? I heated that up, draped it over top, and then I had trouble with that too. So whatever. Anyways, long story short, what happened was I wound up with a piece that was fitting over top of here, and then the next question was how to attach a transfer bar to that. So my first version went on the top. This is the bottom, obviously, so turn this around. Went on there so that it rode in the top of the track here and hung over top of the charging handle over here. So here's a little video for that to give you a nice idea. It's a little wobbly, but I have a way to fix that. So that I called that version 1. So that was version 1. So now this is 2. This is what wound up being 2. And then I'm not sure if I want to call this would be 2, I guess. So that first piece I talked about is the piece that's actually inside here right there, right? It wasn't thick enough, wasn't heavy enough. So I took a second piece of Kydex and I heated that up and I wrapped it around this while it was sitting on the handguard. Now that seemed to work okay. The problem was there was rivets sticking through the other side here. You can see that there. So I right there on that side there, and they're also on the inside here. I can't take that apart. It's glued together. So then that wasn't going to work for me because I was starting to mark up the side of the handguard. I start marking up the side of the receiver. I didn't like that, so I wrapped it in some Kydex here. So this turned into version 2. The problem was then I was getting a lot of transferring like this, and it was rickety and it wasn't very good because the Kydex isn't very rigid, right? So then I made, it was a key mod rail. So I took the key mod screws with the screws from the key mod. Those go through the handle here, through here. And then I had these, instead of having them turned so they keyed into the keyway, I kept them like that so they went forward and back. Then I figured out where I wanted the handguard to sit on here, where I wanted the pump to move through, and I cut out the webs in between. Now, I don't have a mill, so what I did was I took my jigsaw and I cut a blade kind of in half so that at the full bottom of the stroke, it wasn't gonna hit the top of the wasn't gonna hit over here, but at the bottom of the stroke, it was still past the bottom of the fence on the jigsaw. So then I very carefully clamped this up, something like this, right? And then I used the jigsaw and I cut the webs out on both sides up to where I wanted them. And then I used a file to trim up the edges so that they would be flush with the extra of the rail. So I had a nice straight notch in the bottom of my handguard. So then that's when I had an MOE grip on here, like the hand stop kit on the bottom of this, and I went from that to a BCM grip like that, so that it had actually started like this, and then flipped it around to this, and then I still had a lot of pressure, because no matter how careful I was, as I was cutting this with a jigsaw, every once in a while the blade would grab and it deformed the aluminum slightly in the handguard. So that was a problem that I had to worry about as well too. So I got through that a different way. But anyways, so then that turned into version 2, I guess we'll call that version 2. The problem with that was there still wasn't very much rigidity, and it was still floppy, and I didn't like how this went around the charging handle. So if you look at this would go over the charging handle like that, and it was, I don't know, it was too much stuff hanging out there. There was stuff that could get caught on stuff. It was terrible. So that pretty much tossed this one away. Here's some videos of that. It's shitty. It's really stiff. Yeah. There you go. Okay, so I had a thought. I had this gunfighter grip. Put it on there instead. So I still got the hand stop here. Might swap it out for the one that was in the back before, but we'll see. But instead of grabbing it like this and having it cam over on the bottom here where it's in that notch I made, looks way better. So now that got me thinking some more. So then I took a single layer of Kydex and I trimmed it up. I cut it so that it went all the way around. I measured that first, cut it nice and straight, and then I added this little bit on the front so that once it was in place, I could heat it and flip it over. And then I molded that in there, and it's a little sloppy, but that's what I was going for. So what I actually did was I think I did this and then this, so that I had a, this is backwards. I did this. The handguard's upside down so you guys can see what's going on here. So then I had this piece, and then this piece on top of it. I thought about gluing the two pieces together, but decided to not to. This one here, these two layers are glued together, which helped a lot with the rigidity. And I was actually thinking about ordering some heavier Kydex to keep on going with this. But so now the transfer bar, this one here started out as a piece of aluminum angle iron like this. This is left over from a different project that I had. The problem is that it's a shorter piece. You can see that it's 1/2 inch or 3/8 angle. So I wanted the rigidity front, like, you know, it doesn't bend that easily. If you were to take a piece of flat bar, it's going to be bendy and flexy, and that was not going to be what I wanted. So what I did then was I basically took the bar and I flattened it, and I flattened it on top of each other. I'm not sure if you can see that very well. So, and that actually added, it's flexier now than just the angle is, but it's a lot more rigid than just a flat piece of thin metal. So what happened there was I would take screws like this through that hole. Let's see if I can get this on here. So it's on the wrong side of the handguard for me. So here we go, like that. Wrong screw. Here we go, 832 screw. That's the screws I used. There. And then I go into the other piece on the transfer bar, and that works good. But again, the same problem I was having on the bottom, there was webs in the way. So then I trimmed the webbing off on the side the same amount. I'd already learned at that point that the T-nuts that come with your M-lock strips aren't going to be good for that. So that's when I designed something else. So what I did was I've got a lathe, so it's not beyond my realm of, I had some aluminum, 1/2 inch diameter aluminum stuff. So I turned it down so that it would fit just a little bit wider than the, I'm not sure if you guys can see this or not in there. If I get this like this in here. Lighting's bad. Anyways, with a key mod rail, you got two proud bits on either side of the notch. So that when your T-nut goes in and then turns, it binds against those edges and won't turn anymore, so you can keep on tightening up your screw. And that's what locks it in place there. And then when you back it out a 1/2 turn, it turns it so it's straight, and then it drops straight through. And that's how they're designed, and that's how they're supposed to work. The problem is that keeps things on the rail where you need it, right where you need it all the time, and it isn't very productive for working that way. So what I did was I turned some I think it was 1/2 inch diameter stuff down just a little bit, and then made a shoulder in there, and I made this so that I had a piece about I want to say an 1/8 of an inch donut on top of a 3/16 shaft that fit inside the notch, and then I threaded through the middle and parted that piece off. So then I wound up with a bunch of donuts that would fit inside the rail, that would sit slightly proud of the bottom of the handguard, that these screws could then attach to, and that's kind of how I went with that. So then I tried several different ways to get those to sit in there the way I wanted them to. And here, I'll just pull this off of here quick. Oh. So, also cut down the screws, I guess. That's pretty obvious, I guess, but maybe it's not. So this guy goes in there like this, like this, like this. So now the next question I had was, is one screw here and 1 or 2 screws on the bottom going to be enough? I decided that it wasn't going to be enough. So what I did was attach 2 screws here, 2 screws there, with those donuts on the inside of the handguard. And then I wound up filing the sides of the donuts down so that they fit inside the notch, but we're still proud of the notch. I like if that makes any sense. I'm not sure. I can't seem to find the donuts, so I can't show you what they look like, and I don't really want to make more to show you. So, and I ran that for a while, and it actually worked pretty good. On the other end here, where this hole is here, I left it long on purpose because I wasn't sure if I was going to make it longer or I was going to make it shorter, if that makes any sense. So what I did then was I took a piece of fairly thick flat bar aluminum. Let's see if I can find a piece here. Anyways, and I drilled one hole through the center of it, and then I filed it down so it fit inside the notch, the side of the receiver. So, and that turned into the piece that's right underneath this guy in here, right? I blew number 3 apart to steel parts for everything else. So anyways, so that got me to where I was then. I just had a piece of aluminum rectangle in here with a hole through the middle. I used a screw that was the same thread pattern as the threaded hole in the bolt, in the bolt. And actually this worked for a while. One thing I did notice was that every once in a while my donuts would loosen off because, well, I'm not a great machinist, so they weren't very smooth. They weren't really awesome. The handguard was a little rough, and every once in a while those donuts would catch on something and back off, and then it would get looser and things would move a lot easier, but it was really sloppy, and I wasn't happy with how that was working out. So that ended version 3. I ran it like that for a while. I went on a couple of longer road trips into the backcountry. And it was underneath the seat of the truck there. I took it around a little bit in the countryside around here, and that's just kind of how it worked for a while. So that was version 3. I had the folder on it then too. Folding mechanism. I think this is the one, or maybe it isn't. Maybe it's this one. Here we go. So this is a wish folder. This one's black, and it looks just like the Law tactical units. Pretty straightforward. You release it, it locks open, a little bit of pressure, pops open, and it works good. And right from new, they work good, but the more you use it, like this one here, you can always already see the finish wearing off here. And I've just done that like 3 times, right? So like this is, you can't just slam it open and then pop it open, like slam it closed and then start using it. It doesn't work that way. If you do that, you're gonna bugger up that tang fairly quickly. Right here, it's gonna wear out on you. Anyway, so these are like 40 bucks on Wish. I've seen them for sale in Canada at a couple different retailers. I'm not sure if it's the same unit that you're getting from Wish in Canada, but it could be. So anyways, so I did that, and it worked okay, but it wasn't the end result I was looking for. So from there, I decided to abandon the whole plastic idea, just because I didn't see that was going to work out very well. So I grabbed some aluminum that I had. I grabbed a piece of 2-inch diameter aluminum round stock that was sitting around here. Spun it up in the lathe, or sorry, I should say first, I cut it off because this is how much I wanted. Spun it up in the lathe, and I drilled a big ass hole through the middle of it, as far as I can get with a drill bit, flipped it around, did this other side again. Now I had a live center I could put on this end. I turned the outside diameter just down a little bit so that it was the diameter I wanted it to be, and then flipped it around and did the same thing again. So now I had a fairly straight hole through the middle and a true outside. I then bored out the middle with a boring bar, and I did that probably half this way and then flip it around, do half the other way, and I got it so that I had the right diameter inside to go around my handguard. So now that's where that was. Then it came time to cut that notch in the top, because that's where the top rail is going to go, right? This is how it's supposed to go, is on like this, right? So that when you pump it, it's moving outside of this rail. And I felt the tighter I could make that to the top, the better off I was going to be. So then I had an extra 7 to 10 thousandths of space on the inside. So it was going to have enough clearance that I wasn't too concerned about it. And then I figured out how wide that notch in the top had to be. And I scribed 2 lines. Took it to a buddy of mine who has a mill, who clamped it up in the mill, and we cut a notch, and then we cut to the other line, and the damn thing sprung back. So now she's 10 thousandths too tight on the inside to fit on my handguard, and this gap here is now close to a 1/16 of an inch too tight to fit on the top strap. So now at this point I was thinking I got two options. I could continue down this road and I could cut a little bit more off and then spread it out a little bit, or just spread it out a little bit and see if I can't get it to bend. But then I realized that I wasn't going to be happy with just an aluminum wrap out there. I'd still want to put a plastic wrap around it. So then I started thinking about that. And at this point, we're, you know, a fair bit into the project at this point, because I was thinking something like this, right? I'd wrap it in plastic, because I don't know about you guys, but that's the one failing to the rifles like this is it's cold outside for half the year, and I don't like it when my skin freezes to my firearms. So, and that's what I was thinking there, because I was thinking again that I would just take something like this and drill and tap a couple of screws and make sure this material is thick enough that I could cut the screw off so it would sit flush on the inside, and away we go. So anyways, this one here is still on the back burner now. I don't think I'm going to progress with it at all. It's too much work, too much effort for the end result. Figuring out how much spring back you're going to get so you can plunge a hole, the hole that you want in the first place, is a huge pain in the keister. So long story short, this is gone. I'm not going to continue on with that one. So now we get to my final, my current iteration of this pump handle. So I'm an electrician. That's my day job. So I have a lot of PVC pipe that I deal with, and one of the reasons I have a heat gun is because PVC pipe, you can buy 90-degree fittings, and you can buy, you know, termination fittings like the LBs and stuff like that for PVC electrical tubing. But one thing you can't get is offsets or 45-degree bends on, you know, smaller nominal size tubing. You can probably get 45s for a 3-inch or a 4-inch tubing, but not for like a 2-inch or an 1.25 inch. So I had a couple chunks of 2-inch, and I just said, screw it. I measured out how much I was going to need around. I cut a piece just a little bit longer than this, actually. I cut a notch in the top so I could, and then I used my heat gun to heat it up and flatten it right out. So once it was flattened out, I was like, okay, so it's flat, and then I used one edge as a square. I used it because I cut this off with a miter saw, so I had a square edge here, square edge that, measured how far I needed to go, cut a square edge there, and then that didn't work. Heating that and then getting that wrapped around the handguard just right, when you're dealing with something that's in that 250 to 300 degrees range, it's just too tough to do. So then I started all over again. I caught another piece, the length I wanted. I didn't go a little longer. I went the exact length I wanted. I cut it once along the top, and then I heated it up, and so I had a piece that was longer. So then I basically took my handguard like this, put it in the vise like this, heated up that plastic, which is fairly thick. It's a fairly robust, thicker plastic, as you can see by this. It's pretty darn close to 3/16 thick. Heated that up with the heat gun, right? I took here's a dirty rag that'll work real nice for that. I took the piece of plastic, flopped it over top like this, and then I used took a bunch of pinch grip clamps like these guys, and I just pinched them on the bottom like that, just like that. And I did that. I used 5 of them. I can't remember what it was. I think I got 6 of the darn thing. So I filled up the whole top with a piece of plastic, clamped it on, let it cool, and then that's when I realized I made a huge mistake, because now this thing was on there and it was tight. I could barely move the darn thing, so that wasn't going to work. So I took that piece off, and at that point I realized I had like an extra inch, almost, it seemed like, of material hanging off either side. So then what I did was I took masking tape like this, and I put 3 layers of masking tape on the handguard like this. Come on, you piece. Like that. So that's 1 layer. 2 layers. It's really shitty. Took much more care and attention when I did this to make the real unit, just so you know. You can put a little, you want your seams to be on the flats, I think, because that's where you want it to be. That's where it doesn't matter. Anyways, 3 layers of masking tape just like that. Reheated my plastic bit, draped it across again, and then clamped it in place, just like that. Now, come on. So now that got me nice and tight to the rail. It cooled down, solidified, popped the clamps off, muscled that off, peeled off the tape. I just ruined this. I just destroyed a quarter of a roll of tape there, didn't I? Oh, whatever. Pulled off the tape I had sitting here, just like that. And then I took my piece of plastic that had been formed, dropped it in there, and be damned if that thing didn't slide back and forth like butter. One issue I found was the top looked ugly. I'll maybe put in a couple of pictures so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But the top looked ugly because where it had been crimped, because where I'd used the clamps to clamp it had caused some divots to form in there, and it looked ugly. And then also, because the clamp was on the top, it actually got this part here to form into the underside of the plastic. So where the little notches are underneath the rail here, those actually formed in and actually caused it to lock a little bit. So from there, I just trimmed off the excess that was on there, cut it off where I wanted it to be cut off. I used tried just using a piece of sandpaper and then a file. That wasn't working out so great. So then what I wound up doing eventually was taking the diamond bit like this, or this is actually not a diamond bit, that's something else, but this is, my Dremel's always sitting here like this, hanging here. So I took that and I just kind of took off the major portions of it there, and then tried it again, kept test fitting it until I actually got a result that I really liked. And there's a little bit of play on the handguard, but not a crazy bit. Like you get on the handguard and there's a little bit of play, but not a crazy bunch, right? There's a bit of play, but not a lot. So, oh, come on, there we go. Oh, you got me. So, and that got me the rough shape that I want. Use the finger. So then, I then tried to figure out how I was going to attach the screws. I actually thought about doing this 2 ways, 1 or 2 screws, or 3 screws, but there's a reason actually that they aren't all on the same line in the same plane with each other. And that was because I have some experience in the past with having 2 or 3 screws in line like that together. You wind up actually stacking your holes, and then you wind up actually getting deformation on your holes. So that's why there's 3 different heights there. That was by design. That wasn't because I'm a shitty tradesperson. And then I also realized that this plastic is thick enough and beefy enough that the screws I put in there, I could actually cut them off so that they would be even with the inside of the plastic. So right there, I thought, geez, that's a great idea. So then this is, you can still see the gray from the plastic underneath there. I'll maybe insert some pictures here somewhere just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so at that point then I decided that I was going to stipple this handguard because it looked like crap. I knew I was going to paint it because it looked like crap. So that's when I realized this is how I was going to attach it. I cut a new piece of bar, only this time instead of folding it over like this, I decided that that little extra bit here on the edge of this guy here, if I cut this guy off so that he was just a little bit of an angle on there, and that's what I wound up with there. I'm not sure if you guys can see that or not, But there's the long side. There's the reflection from the light there kind of gets in there. You can kind of see how that's got a little bit of an angle on it. And it's amazing how much rigidity that added to the transfer bar. So my next thought was, how am I going to get the transfer bar to attach here? Do I cut a notch in the plastic and then glue it in place? So, or do I just cut the little bit extra angle off on here so that it sits flat? So that's what I want to do, is I want to cut in the aluminum so it sat flat. I marked around everything, and then I stippled the crap out of it. So I'll throw some pictures in here of that stippling. So that's what the stippling looked like. Once it was stippled, because I took everything off here when it was stippled, I then realized that you really couldn't rely on these screws, metal screws and plastic, to hold everything in place. So I knew I was going to have to epoxy some stuff on here. So what's exactly what I did is I mixed up some DevCon steel putty, and I put a little bit of steel putty on the underside of the bar, and I also put a dab on each of the screws. So like, I drilled and tapped the screws in the plastic, right? But it's plastic. So I then screwed the screws in, lined everything up, screwed the screws in on the handguard. I put epoxy on the underside, because this is just a piece of aluminum bar, right? So I put a piece of I put some epoxy on there, so it would glue it together there, like roughed it up nice, degreased it, all that kind of stuff. And then I actually bolted this up on the rifle, and then cleaned up all the epoxy that's squished out there. And that's how I got this and this to sit where it is now, is because that's where it sits naturally on the rifle. So that's how I set those ones. The next day, I also mixed up some more epoxy, and I did the same thing with the M-LOK handguard. And at that time is when I built up this corner little bit here, because I'm not sure if you can see that well in the camera here, but there's a bit of epoxy built up here in the corner. And the reason for that is I wanted to make sure that I had a good solid connection there, where this wasn't going to wind up being the weak point and where it would deform or bend or break, right? So that's how that all wound up there like that. So that's how I settled on this design, and that's how I did that. So then once this was all done, I decided I would paint it, because it looked like somebody had burnt the plastic with a soldering iron, which is exactly how I stippled it. And you had silver and gray and whatever else. So actually, I painted it before I glued this on, is what I did there. So I had these holes drilled and tapped and everything else. I pulled this off, I painted it black, and then I epoxied this on after I'd epoxied this. And man, why did I take it apart and put it together so many damn times? It works. That's all that really matters. So now on the inside there, you can see where the paint is starting to wear off, where it's rubbing against the handguard on the Renegade. So that's just how that works. So yeah, and that's how I got to here. At that point, I decided that my rifle was in really rough shape. I'd been doing a lot of test fitting and rejiggering and everything else like that, so the rifle was in really, really horrid shape. So I decided to paint the rifle as well. So I painted the rifle, and that's what we get now, is the rifle. Now you can see here, it's been painted, right? But you can see on the bottom here where the notch was cut out for version 1, version 2, and version 3. And here for version 3. I'm not sure if you can see it in there or not in the pictures, but there's still a little bit of deformation to this handguard. The handguard's still rigid, it's still solid, so I'm not too terribly concerned about that. But it was a bit of a pain in the keisters. But you can see as well up here, because if you look at the end of the handguard, you can see that it's rounded on the corners and it's got flats, because that's how M-LOK works, right? So the beautiful part about that is you're really only getting contact on the corners. You're not getting contacts in the flats. So that's also where the wear marks are. Not sure if you can see them real well or not. There's some wear marks there. The corners here, corner here, as well as in there. So, and that's just the way it's going to be, if that makes any sense. So that's how that all went together. So yeah, that's I guess the entirety of the build video. Not sure if that was helpful. Not sure if it's not. The next piece is, because we're not done yet. So what I did was I talked to a buddy of mine who does have a 3D printer, and I talked to him about what I wanted. And this is what I came up with, and this is what I gave him. So basically what's going to happen is what I want to have for the next version is I'm going to use a piece, this same type of angle iron. I'm going to trim off a piece, just like I did for this guy here. And he's going to 3D print me a handle that's going to go over top of the handguard, but the hand stop is going to be flush with the front, and this bit here is going to be flush with the back, just like it shows in the picture. And then on the side here, I'm going to get them to also 3D print in a pocket that will fit this piece of aluminum in there. I want about 2 inches, I think, of aluminum in there. So you'll wind up with the handguard the same distance around like this one is, but there's going to be extra material on the side like that there, which I don't know if that's going to help or hurt. For a righty, it actually fits really nicely into the crack in the palm of your hand there. So that might be okay, who knows. We're going to have to play with that and figure out what all that's about. And then I'm probably going to continue on with the idea of taking the rectangular stock and epoxying it in place. But one thing I might do is I might reintegrate the steel pins that Armoury uses for their handle on the side. One other thing I want to mention too is the handle here is 3/8 of an inch shorter than the OEM one. Just because I didn't need that big of a handle. It's not the primary way of racking this thing. I wanted enough there that I could grab it, but not so much that it was sticking out, right? Especially at the time, the folder was folding onto the side. And so if you have a folding stock like this, and you have an extra 1/2 inch of material out here, it makes for a really thick, wide package, and it didn't fit well anywhere that I wanted to put it. So anyways, that's why that got altered. I'm still on the fence whether or not that other handle is good or bad. Right now, I don't think it doesn't hinder operation. It adds a little bit of weight, but I'm not sure if that's a big deal. But that might change yet too. But yeah, this is where we're at right now for a PEMP handle. Oh, and the thread pattern on the inside of the bolt is a standard 1032, which I thought was really handy because I can buy those screws pretty much anywhere. I prefer Allen cap screws. I could go maybe with like a pan head style. These are a little big. Those are probably 12s. Maybe this is an 8. Anyways, it's a standard thread pattern anyway. So that's the idea, is that's all that holds that transfer bar to the bolt, is that little bit of thread there. Sketchy as heck. And that's another reason why I'm thinking about the pins, because the pins would not hurt that idea. They'd probably help a little bit, because then the pins are taking additional stress as well as the threaded fastener. But you still want to be able to take apart your rifle for cleaning and disassembly for whatever reason, right? So this has to be something that can come off. So, and that's where that comes in. Thanks, guys.